Okay, okay. Yes, good morning from where I am sitting. I'm in sunny Phoenix, Arizona, so there is not much of a trace of winter here. I know we usually have a large presence from the US West Coast, so it's 9 a.m. there in the morning. But no matter where you are, so thanks for maybe getting up early for you on a Saturday. So we're going to talk about grants today, grant funding, non-dilutive, that means zero equity giveaway grant funding, specifically the SBIR program. So a little bit of housekeeping. We have too many people, way too many people on the call for to ask questions live during the presentation. So we'll have a Q&A when the presentation's done, which is ETA about 45 to 50 minutes, I would say. Then there's going to be time for Q&A until basically the hour and a half mark, and the webinar is going to end then. Okay, so just in case, if there's the one of the inevitable questions is whether the recording will be sent and the slides will be sent out. The answer is yes to both. Okay, so don't ask that. So okay, SBIR, Small Business Innovation Research. Okay, it has a sister program as TTR, which does involve universities. Not going to specifically talk about that. If you're interested, we do that. We do that also. But this is focused on SBIR because it's it's the vast majority of what we're doing. And it does not require any kind of involvement by universities or research organizations, public or private, other than yourself. Okay, so the company I represent is Inspiralia USA. It's the U.S. entity of Inspiralia. Inspiralia it's originally from Spain, Madrid, Spain. So I mean we're all you know uh, we um, we all try to keep in warm latitudes because the U.S. office is in the U.S. headquarters is in Miami, Florida. And if you end up working with us, a lot of the people are going to be based out of there. But we have people, it's a mix. We have a mixture of in office and remote staff and consultants. It's a mixture of both, right? So we have a long track record. We've been doing this for a while, so we have gotten. So I need to update this slide at some point. So because it's over 1,000 projects at this point, basically helped startups and small businesses uh, uh, access over $500 million in funding. We have bandwidth, so we have the capacity to work on about 50 proposals at the same time. Okay, so 50 project managers, which we call innovation consultants. Okay, so so it's not the only thing Inspiralia is doing. So we have other business units, but especially in the US, it's most of our business is actually based on grants. Okay, SBIR STTR, it's the largest source of federally funded early stage R&D that's accessible for private companies, where you can directly apply as a private entity without somehow subcontracting through a university or such. So it's typically over $4 billion a year, the budget. So in case you're worried about politics, I mean, it's just been reauthorized by I think without any opposition, it passed Congress, no problem. So this isn't going anywhere. It has a very broad bipartisan backing. There are many good companies, many large important companies got their start at least partly through SBIR, STTR, and you can't ignore that, right? And Plus, in addition, of course, many specialty businesses that had a high impact in research, medicine, defense, and whatnot. Okay, so it takes zero equity, so you just get the money. Okay, that means zero equity means it's non-dilutive, right? So and it funds projects. Okay, this is an important detail. It doesn't fund companies. Okay, so it's not going to fund the everyday operation of your company, right? So it's not going to pay rent for your office. Okay, so you need to come up with an R&D proposal that one of these agencies pictured here considers worthy of funding. And no, these are different agencies. USDA is U.S. Department of Agriculture. That's actually one of the smaller ones. There is a Department of Defense, National Institutes of Health, and NSF. Those three are the largest ones. And so you apply. So you don't apply to the Small Business Administration. You apply to one of these agencies, and they have all different criteria. They decide according to which criteria the funds are dispersed within constraints of legislation, of course, right? Okay, so how does it work? So there are really three phases. Actually, they don't all have three phases, or there is a phase three always, but they don't all call it phase three. Okay, but so we'll focus on phase one and phase two because they're the most streamlined among the agencies. The duration here in phase one, it's really everything from 3 months to 24 months. Whereas typically what we see, I mean, a plurality of the companies we work with, it takes about a year, I would say. And the funds you get is everywhere from quite low 75K up to 400K. But typically these days, a typical phase one grant is about 300,000. Okay. So then phase one is followed by phase two. Okay, so phase one, you're meant to prove the basic concept of your proposal, of your project you have in mind, right? So here so basically you're meant to pack all the highest risk R&D into phase one, right? So you put together a small team, typically, depending what you're doing, 2, 3 people, right? And you're proposing to again de-risk it, right? So if you build hardware, it may be a minimum viable prototype, and actually, they call that in software too, of course. So now, if phase one goes well, you can apply it for phase two, or you can apply anyway, of course. But if phase one went well, according to the NSF, for example, or the NIH, then okay, then you apply, and if phase one went well, you typically get phase two, and that's where the really interesting money is. So this is from 750K to 3 million. It's typically we see 1.25, 1.25 million. This is for NSF and Air Force specifically, and 2 million is for the National Institutes of Health. Right. So this is more, it's about, 1.5 million-ish in that ballpark. Okay. And phase three, that's a special topic. If that's really, if you have a question about phase three, you probably know most of what's going to be presented in this webinar anyway. Okay, is it a fit for you? Okay, so there are formal requirements. There are informal requirements also, but these are the most important formal requirements. Okay, so you need to be a U.S. entity. So you need to have an entity. So you cannot, Kevin Smith cannot, apply as an individual. You have to have an entity, an LLC or an S corp, C corp, doesn't matter. But it needs to be a registered business in the U.S. Majority owned, 50% plus X by U.S. citizens or permanent residents. So within the framework of this program, no difference whatsoever is made between U.S. citizens and permanent residents, aka green card holders. Actually, I'm told there are permanent residents that are not green card holders also. So it's any permanent resident. So then, then you should have staff, whereas you don't need to have staff at the time of application yet. Okay. So again, you're not, the important part isn't your company right now. It is what your company will be at the time when you want the funds. So so your full-time employees or your no, not full-time employees, but the employees you pay directly through the budget, they need to be W-2 employees. Again, not at the time of application yet. You don't have to have any W-2 employees yet when you apply. But once you get the funds, you need to plan, and you need to outlay those plans to hire the people you're proposing as W-2 employees. It can be part-time. Actually, it usually is, right? Because I mean, the companies we usually work with, they're relatively early stage, so they don't have a whole bunch of full-time W-2 employees whose main employment it is. Okay, there's in terms of full-time employment or majority time employment, the only exception is that the PI is the principal investigator. They are the person basically, directing, managing the research, and often they're often founders or major. They're usually it's usually a person who has contributed to the technology significantly. That's typically a PI, right? So, and the PI has to be primarily employed with at least 51% of the time. Now, the federal government views a 40-hour work week as a standard. So, of course, if you ever been in a startup, you work a whole lot more than 40 hours. But basically, so the PI has to work 20 hours plus X a week on their startup. So, that's kind of a weekend and 2 evenings. So, so you should have facilities, right? So a physical office, some sort of physical presence. Okay. So, now here I mean, they make, you have a lot of leeway here, right? I mean, we've gotten companies funded, basically that were started out of shared student apartments, and they were renting space or they were basically renting desks, shared desks in a co-working space. Okay, so that's they're a bit more relaxed about that, especially if you do software, right? I mean, you don't really need, you need a desk and a bunch of computers and maybe some cloud computing credit. Okay, so one thing, an important rule, only up to one-third of the activities can be subcontracted. So that means you cannot. So they don't want you to just aggregate a bunch of subcontractors and have them put something together. The majority, meaning two-thirds plus, of the work needs to be done by the company that's applying. Okay, there are no exceptions made here, so you can't go over that. And that's in phase one. Okay, in phase two, it's up to 50% actually. But we generally recommend not getting close to that. Okay, unless you have a really good reason. So yeah, so there is then R&D on American soil. Of course, it's taxpayer funded, so you can't have a subcontractor in Ireland or anywhere else, right? So everyone needs to work in the U.S. And of course, permanent residents are treated as citizens basically for this. Okay, so the deadlines, there is no single deadline for this. The deadlines change among agencies, and in many cases, they're different from one year to the next. Especially the Department of Defense is notorious for that. I mean, their deadlines they're kind of all over. But here are some example agencies, right? There's the National Science Foundation. It's my favorite agency. I mean, it's their R&D. It's their R&D they fund. It's traditionally, based. They're coming out of the physical sciences, of course. So that's traditionally a strong focus point. So The next deadlines are in March and July. I know I wrote June here, sorry. It's actually July 2025. So March, so as of today, if you haven't done anything towards that, March is too short term. Okay, you cannot apply. I mean, even if you're a total newbie, we couldn't get you ready for March. July, absolutely. July, that's realistic, depending on how ready you are, of course. Okay, so the NSF has the broadest range of topics. I'm going to show the topics later. And the NSF requires, so you can't just apply directly to the NSF. The NSF has to invite you, so you have to ask the NSF to invite you. Okay, the way you ask the NSF to invite you to present to submit a proposal is you submit a project pitch. So it's a mini proposal. So you need to kind of propose your proposal about you should do it about 4 weeks before the deadline, right? So that means if you want to get in by July, then the project pitch needs to go in by June. And the project pitch it's a short it's a short, it's text-based, it's a couple of pages, 1,500 words, optionally one or two images. Okay, so you see at the bottom here, you see the awards, right? So especially the phase one for a lot of these has increased. I'm pleased to say that it's increased faster than the rate of inflation over the past years. So 305,000 right now. So I mean, that's real money, right? For most earlier startups. And then of course the phase two is more interesting, right? Department of Energy, it's actually, I mean, Department of Energy, so you might think they fund a lot of small business research, and they fund some, but we actually don't do as much. I mean, not nearly as much with the DOE as with NSF or NIH. Okay, which means, I mean, usually DOE topics, they're more narrowly focused, they're more selective, and there's certainly a tendency that they more strongly favor companies that have gotten grants before or have ties to research. The NSF is very egalitarian. Okay, the NSF is probably, I mean, everything else being equal, is probably the best agency to start with to get the process going. So then, of course, there's the NIH, National Institutes of Health, that is plural. Of course, there are multiple. There is everything from National Institute of Aging, everything. It's craniofacial, dental, everything. And those sub agencies, they all make their own rules to a certain extent, and they all set their own funds, right? So you may the NIA may have a solicitation that pays not the 315 shown here, but they may pay 400,000 for a phase one. So the NIH, it's more variable, right? The NIH, it depends more, okay, which is there a medical device? Is it dental? Is it a medical device? Is it a pharmaceutical? Then there is the difference. They do allow human clinical trials. So yeah, or they have funding categories that don't allow them, right? So it's a lot of again, it's NIH plural in every respect. So they have a nice phase two award, but of course that's because clinical trials are expensive. So then there are smaller agencies, right? There is Department of Agriculture, which is coming up, in the fall again. It's only once a year. EPA, they actually those funding. I need to update. This is higher now. This is more than 650 and 400 respectively. So and then of course the DoD. The DoD is large, okay, and the DoD a little bit like the NIH. You don't typically apply to the DoD as such for SBIR funding. You apply to its agencies, Air Force, Army, Navy mainly, obviously, right? So we do a lot of DoD, right? So now for 2025, the DoD hasn't published its open topics deadlines yet. It's large open topics programs. We expect the next one to be in the summer and to be announced sometime in the spring. It could be any time really. So yeah. So and here I'll actually give an example about for a DoD program, from the Air Force specifically. And here it is. That's AFWERX. So it's Air Force Ventures, right? So the Air Force is probably the most innovative agency within the DoD, certainly when it comes to funding ventures, right? They're very open-minded. They're great to work with. They love technology, and of course, the only drawback is the phase one is the award is smaller, but it's also very short. Okay, so and also the timeline the timeline for them to decide on your application, it's by far the shortest, right? It's typically 2 months or less, so 8 weeks or less. They have their decision. And also here, this is a little different, right? I mean, actually all of the other agencies really, phase one tends to be, you're doing actual R&D work during phase one. For AFWERX, it's not so much, right? For the AFWERX during phase one, what they want you to do is they want you to take your technology and present it to different potential Air Force customers, Air Force stakeholders, right? So so basically the goal is to find an application for your technology within the Air Force, and you have 3 months for that during phase one, and they pay you 75,000. So I mean it's really, it's really a pretty sweet deal, right? Because you get $75,000 and you pay your people to look for potential Air Force customers, which does take time, of course, right? And as you might imagine, as you might imagine, of course, the Air Force doesn't have a search engine where you can go, hey, I have a medical device company, which Air Force bases do need an endoscopy device, for example, right? So there is no such thing, right? So you kind of need to know the Air Force. It's actually with all of these agencies. You kind of need to know how they work, right? So and of course, I mean, this is where we come in as an innovation agency, right? As Inspiralia. So I mean, we have a very large network within the Air Force, former service members, former employees, former reviewers who are contracting with us, and who know people within the Air Force. So I mean, so typically I mean, any given technology, be it the Air Force or the other agencies, we have a really good idea, who should have their eyes on that proposal to advance it to the next level, basically, right? So yeah. And then of course phase two, that's the actual work. You do your work during phase two. It's 1.25 million. So you have up to 21 months. 12 is the minimum here. And what's also nice is that the Air Force, or actually the DoD in general, they don't only fund your research, they will also be your first customer if the project went well. Okay, because the reason the DoD funds research is, they're primarily looking for dual use technologies for them to use. Right now, these are not weapon systems, right? They're actually excluded. So you don't have a security clearance, or you don't have to have a security clearance or anything like that to apply for these, right? So these are, energy systems, medical devices, apps, even human resources apps, things like that, right? If they're innovative. But basically, once you go through that program, okay, you have a customer right away. And so once you're in their customer roster, okay, you're there. So unless you screw up, they're going to be reliable for years forward. So usually this is for many. I mean, we've seen many companies. They got. I mean, even only a 75,000 award, right? So once they get that, and once you announce as a company that you got an Air Force grant, because the venture community, they know that, okay, once you get funded by the DoD, they're going to be a customer. So you're much more investable, right? So this is actually this applies with all of these grants, by the way. So I mean, if you get the funding, I mean, I don't know. I mean, it's 75,000 or even 300,000 to some companies that may not be all that much money, but that's not the only that there's also the validation behind, right, of basically being funded by a major agency which has done a rigorous peer review of your proposal and of your background as an agency. And if it's the military, they're a customer right away. Of course, the NSF, or for example, or the NIH, they would not be direct customers, of course, right? So, that's different. They give you more money, but they're not, you don't have a customer right away. So focus areas, the Air Force has a wide range of topics. So, of course, one thing you won't see anything that flies and shoots on the slide, which is by design. So again, the reason the Air Force or the DoD in general supports these programs is, I mean, they want to save money for their operations, other than weapon systems, of course, right? So, and the military knows that pretty much anything they're doing, they're overpaying. Basically, they pay way more for anything they buy or consume than the private sector. So that's why they're looking for dual use goods, and really, the focus here is on dual use. So they don't look they're not looking for defense specific solutions, right? So they're looking for a commercial solution that can be adapted to defense, to the DoD, and they don't mind at all if you use that defense adaptation and make money in the commercial sector. In fact, they like it because that makes the technology cheaper usually. So this is another graphic, right? So you have it's phase one, then followed by phase two, right? So and this is one aspect I haven't really gone into it. So there are open topics and specific or special topics. So special topics, oftentimes, as you see here, they're often better funded. But of course, there are specific topics, right? So the Air Force is looking for usually a very specific piece of technology. Now, of course, if you approach us, right, we're going to look at your company. If we find a special topic for you, we're going to suggest that you apply for it. But of course, you can't expect that. What's nice about the open topic, especially for the Air Force and also the NSF, it is very broad, right? So if you have an innovative technology in, everything, environmental cleanup, base, Air Force base housing, anything, right? So you can propose it there, and you have a chance of getting it. They also have quite many awards every year. So then StratFi, TagFi, I mean, these are matching programs mainly, and then there is phase three. So again, these are special topics. So the timeline, again, as I said, they haven't published this timeline for 2025 yet, but the last AFWERX deadline was in October 10th or 11th, as far as I recall. So we had a large cohort. We did almost, no, not almost, we did 40 proposals from different companies for that. And they all found out by mid-December whether they were funded. And so then, of course, so when you get notified here, for example, in this graph, so you get notified that you're selected, or at least you're pre-selected, right? So I mean, so this doesn't necessarily mean you get the money yet. So there is what's called due diligence, right? So there is a phase of a few days where they can ask you any questions, right? And I mean, so I mean, you need to make sure you have reliable email, right? You know that your you know that your spam filter isn't overzealous. So because if you miss that, you miss the grant, right? So of course, you know, if you work with us, right, so we can monitor that feedback for you. We can make sure you know you don't miss that, and we can also make sure that you don't say the wrong things during due diligence, right? So because I mean, you know, we've heard of you know we've heard it all, right? So basically, you know, because once you've reached due diligence, it's yours to lose. Meaning, in due diligence, they only verify they're only tasked to verify that all the claims you made in the proposal are true, right? So again, you already have it in principle. So it would be a pity if you lost it. So then there is 3 months execution, which goes into into April actually. And again, during those 3 months, you're looking for, in the case of the Air Force AFWERX, you're looking for Air Force customers for your tech. So then there is a review process, and so if and when you find an Air Force customer, so you can apply for and of course you should apply for a phase 2 proposal, and that review process is also it's also quite quick. It's you know 4 weeks, 6 weeks, something like that. And then there's phase 2 execution, which is of course takes a while, right? So the funds are dispersed. They're not dispersed at once, so they don't give you 1.25 million in May in this case, for example. So they're dispersed according to the project plan you have proposed and they have approved, of course, right? So and that needs to be reasonable, right? So if your project plan requires that you get all the money on day one, you know, they're going to reject the proposal. I mean, 100%. Okay, who's an ideal candidate for AFWERX? Okay, so you know, the AFWERX, the Air Force typically wants companies that are a little further ahead. So they have, you know, at least you should have an MVP, a minimum viable prototype. Ideally, you should have products out in the world used by somebody, right? So you know, so because they're interested in your ability to scale, right? So some early stage, very early stage idea that hasn't been proven at all yet, it's not so much for this one. That's the NSF. I'm going to show that as a counter example after this. But the Air Force wants, again, higher technology readiness level. TRL, technology readiness level, that's from NASA lingo. This is NASA came up with that during the space race in the Cold War. And basically, you know, it's you know it's an intuitive term. It goes from basic research to basically system test, launch, and operations. Of course, this is NASA lingo here, but you know, it's an obvious. You know, it can be obviously you know transferred to the commercial sector. So they ideally you want to have 6 to 9 or maybe 5 to 9, depending how exciting your technology is. Okay, so again, dual use. Okay, no defense, nothing that shoots, typically nothing that flies. Okay, so it's really important for the Air Force to meet their operational imperatives in the proposal. Okay, so that's for the Air Force, that's the most important aspect, right? So they have you know it's a bureaucracy, the military and its agencies. It's a bureaucracy, and it decides you know, every year or every, you know, once in a while, okay, it's reorienting its priorities. And so it's of course that's being captured in official documents and you need to meet those requirements. Those are changing. There are a lot of changes between the lines. Again, I mean, as Inspiralia, as a company, you know, will obviously help you find the right you know find the right fit here. Okay, so we don't have all you know you see 7 imperatives. I mean they're definitely not equally distributed among the applicants we typically work with. So probably I mean, I want to almost say the majority of what we typically do is in the direction of resilient basing, because that covers all topics from, that covers the wide range of energy systems, housing, sustainability on the basis. Also readiness to deploy and fight. I mean, that's human performance, right? That can be things like a specifically adapted medical device, for example, right? Or an app, or it can be a wellness app, right? Yeah. Okay, so here on the right side is it's an abbreviated list of the documents you need. Now the Air Force is relatively harmless in terms of its documentation requirements. The NSF is and other NIH, they're much more intense. So I've listed the most important points on the left. So the most at the heart of the application is the technical volume, which is basically a pitch deck. It is a slide deck, right? So it's a minimum. It's 11 required slides, and you can have up to 25 slides. That's by far the most important part. Then there is the budget. The budget. It's really important that you don't get anything wrong in the budget in terms of proposing things that aren't, that are against the rules, because then they may reject you out of hand. Team CVs, right? I mean, the CVs, resumes. This is for some reason which I don't comprehend. Companies often neglect those. Okay, so that's my advice, right? Tell your fellow applicants and your employees and everyone who submits a CV, a resume, tell them to put some effort into it, right? Because that can, a badly organized, a visually badly organized CV can cost you the award. Also important, letters of support, right? So letters of support are non-committing letters from people who are regarded to have knowledge in the field, right? It can be potential customers. It can be, of course, if you apply for the Air Force, right? So people who have been, Air Force veterans who may be, in technology. I mean, there are a lot of former DoD members working in the tech industry. So definitely, I mean, it's always a good idea to look through your LinkedIn profile and get out your Rolodex. I don't know if anyone still uses Rolodex, and look for those contacts who've been in the Air Force or other DoD agencies. Okay, so the most important thing is the slide deck, aka technical volume. So it kind of appears like a pitch deck, but really the format is more prescribed. Okay, it's more there's defense need, for example, in here, right? And so it's important to get that right. Okay, it's especially defense need, things like that. Transition plan, meaning transition plan into the Air Force of your technology. So this is an unofficial. This is my own unofficial ranking of you know of what's most important in an AFWERX proposal. Okay, number one by far, defense need. Okay, so you need to have an idea of how the Air Force or the DoD can use that technology. So again, as a company, as Inspiralia, we obviously have experience. We're working with people, with insiders or with former insiders actually, and and um and so we get that right. We've been doing this for a while. So then number two is something that's also for some reason often neglected, right? The quality of the proposal, just the visual quality of the proposal has to be really good. Okay, I mean, reviewers are they don't take they don't take 3 hours per proposal to try to figure out what you were telling by some disorganized slides. Okay, if you it's up to you to organize it so that you can capture the meaning of a slide within like 30 seconds. It needs to be clear, right? It's you can't have too much text, and it needs to be intuitive and clear. Basically, what you're proposing. Then knowledge of airport structure, and that of course is that's changing, right? I mean, actually, they just they're just going through a major reorganization in the Air Force, and so you need to be on top of your game, right? And of course, it takes time, right? And again, if you don't have the time, we have, right? So then team composition and experience, that's important, always important. Commercial scalability, it's more important for the Air Force than for other agencies. So they want a solution that ultimately saves them money, and then partner ecosystem, of course, letters of support. Okay, the next one is the NSF, National Science Foundation. So again, phase one, two, three. So 305,000 for phase one, and again, just a reminder, phase one is that's where the high risk part of your R&D is. And what's different here compared to AFWERX is here phase one is actually you're actually doing R&D work. You're actually expected to, if you build hardware, you're expected to build a prototype of some new project or some new capability. If it's software, same thing. Okay, right? So try to get some, proof the concept during those, 6 to 12 months. The projects are evaluated by the NSF. By far, the most important evaluation criterion is intellectual merit. I mean, they're coming culturally, they're coming from academic research. So basically, everything you submit to the NSF, the application needs to be of a quality equivalent to a peer review publication. So think, I mean, if you're an electrical engineer, think at least an IEEE paper, but a 15-page IEEE paper, or a physical review paper if you're a physicist, right? So it needs to be a high quality publication visually. It needs to be formulated well. Language needs to be, you know, scientific language and references. Again, the references that hold up to that are leak tight, right? So then commercialization potential also important. It's probably in many cases it probably separates winners from non-winners quite a bit, especially with the NSF. Of course, the NSF again, the technical merit is always more important, but the commercialization potential is also important. But of course, given that most applicants to the NSF, it's usually companies run by techies, by engineers, computer scientists, scientists, physicists, whatever. Of course, they're good at building stuff or building software, but not always so good at commercialization, right? So if you have a team, it's always a good idea to balance your technical team with someone who is non-technical and who has experience, verifiable experience on their resume, basically building companies, right? But of course, always, I mean, your team should be always technical, right? I mean, if you're two MBA bodies and you want to submit an NSF uh, proposal, I mean, we certainly wouldn't take you on, right? I mean, get a technical team together. So the range of topic is very broad. Okay, so uh, I mean, it covers medical devices actually here, mobility, nanotechnology. I mean, also a lot of software topics, right? Cloud and high performance computing, digital health, distributed ledger, that's basically blockchain. So again, a very, very wide range of topics. Okay, the open topics. So the schedule is, for the upcoming, so for March 5th, you're in my opinion too late. unless you're already, maybe you've already submitted a project pitch, then you're obviously not too late, right? But reach out to us anyway if you have questions. But right now, the realistic application deadline is July. And again, so as I said before, for the NSF, you need to submit a project pitch 4 weeks. Actually, you should ideally we recommend submitting it 4 weeks before the application closing date. Um, oftentimes they decide really quick, often within a couple of days, but they can take 4 weeks, right? So the writing process, I mean, ideally our writing process for the NSF is very involved, right? It takes a long time to put together an NSF proposal. So we would like to have typically 8 to 9 weeks, ideally. We'll do it in 4 to 6, right? But if it's, if you're 2 weeks ahead of the deadline or 3 weeks, and no, we no, we can't do that, right? It takes too long to mobilize the team, and because we need to, if we want to help you, we need to learn about your company, right? We need to stick our heads in your technology, so to speak. And yeah, so this is more details about the writing process, right? So there is a project validation at the beginning. So this is one important aspect, right? I mean, our compensation structure is really aligned with companies winning grants. There is a small entry fee, a small non-refundable entry fee, just for you to have skin in the game, so to speak. But the vast majority of our compensation is a percentage of the award. Okay, so that means if you don't win the award, then we lose money because the entry fee, again, it's just to make sure you don't get busy with other things and walk away in the middle of the process. Yeah. And of course, we accompany you through the whole process through due diligence. So we do there's a number of, I haven't gone into that. There's a number of registrations you need. You need to apply with, you need to register with the Small Business Administration. You need to have a UEI number, basically a government contractor number, right? I mean, if you have those numbers, that's fine, right? If you don't, and you want us to help you get them, we'll certainly do that. It's not terribly complicated, right? So you could do it yourself. Here, this is the project pitch, which I mentioned. This is basically the proposal for the NSF. So it's basically 1,500 words covering 4 different topics: technical innovation, basically the number two. It's basically the project plan, right? The proposed rough draft of the project plan. Then 250 words, customer profile and unmet needs, and then basically the last one is it's about your company, mainly about the team members, really. It really should be called a team section. Okay, the proposal structure is, it's you have a one-page summary, then the project description, 15 pages, and the project description is at the heart of it. So think about it. It's a 15-page peer-reviewed paper, which needs to be completely unassailable technically, right? So it takes a while to write that, and then a whole bunch of other, budget. Of course, you always need a budget. Then the resumes, CVs, they call bio sketches, biographical sketches. So this is a summary of the project description of that 15-page paper. So everything counts towards it except bibliography, except the references that can be outside the 15-page limit. But basically, elevator pitch. Elevator pitch has a prescribed length, 1 page maximum. The rest is pretty. pretty flexible, with the exception intellectual merits need to have at least 5 pages. So that's section 5 here. Section 5, that's where the meat is, right? That's where, this is really where you describe your technology for the experts, right? So this will be viewed by a subject matter expert, probably some PhD in something related. So so they will review it and make sure it's sound, right? So don't propose anything that violates laws of physics. Okay, that's not gonna fly. Um, so who's the ideal candidate? This is different from the Air Force, certainly. It's they earlier stage companies are okay, so you don't need to have revenue here, right? So these are, if you have a team with a history of, you know doing great things, so to speak, right, in industry or in academia, right, then if you put together a sound proposal, yeah, you have a good chance of getting funded. So the TRL can be lower, technology readiness level. So earlier stage usually translates into fewer employees. One thing that's really important, again, this needs to be new R&D, new to world, right? This is something, it shouldn't have been tried or attempted previously. Okay. So what's most important? Okay, again, unofficial, my opinion. So novelty of the project. Okay, in terms of R&D, research and development, the NSF wants more R than D, way more R than D. That's safe to say, especially in phase one. So then the scientific quality of the project description cannot be overstated, right? So you can have a good company, you can have a good idea, but you need to present it such that, you need to have references. Every single claim you make, you need to back it up with a reference, preferably to a peer-reviewed publication. Okay. So team composition is important. It's more the team is more important here than for the military, certainly, including academic credentials. The military doesn't care as much about it. The NSF definitely does, right? It's a sound business plan. Okay, that's, of course. I mean, but it's less important than the technology, but still, it's something a lot of the typical tech founders, they're lacking a little bit, maybe. Partner ecosystem, and then also facilities. Facilities, now that depends, of course, right? If you're building hardware, you need to make the case that you actually have a space to build it, right? I mean, if you're building a prototype for some machine, some generator, let's say, right, you need to have space to build that. You can't say, I'm going to build it in my living room, right? They're not going to believe you. So our services, in short, we do whatever you don't want to do. Okay. So I mean, if you want us to, we find matching proposals for your company. Okay. So of course we need to learn something about your company, right? We need to make sure that your company is fundable, right? It has a realistic chance of getting funded. Doesn't just meet the requirements, but actually has a chance of getting funded. Okay, so from the outset, we're going to ask you for some sort of documentation about your technology, about your company. Nothing confidential, of course. Now, if you wanna go and show us something confidential, of course we're absolutely willing to sign NDAs, right? So this is something. I mean, so we're not as high maintenance as venture capitalists. We will sign NDAs and will adhere to them, and no problem. But we need to learn about your company to decide whether we can work with you, and B, to make sure that we align you with the right funding opportunities. Of course, if you have a specific grant in mind and want us to help for that, fine. We do that too, right? So, and of course, we do all the administrative stuff also. If you want us to, if you want to keep doing it yourself, absolutely no problem. Okay, so 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 if we end up signing a contract, so you'll get assigned a team of 4 people. There's an innovation consultant, basically a subject matter expert in your project, medical devices, energy, something like that. Then a scientific writer, an experienced scientific writer who's also somewhat of a subject matter expert. Then account manager and project manager, right? So the lower, those are centralized functions. They're probably going to be sitting in Miami, for example. And so basically making sure that that what that the contract is followed up, and for example that you don't put anything in the budget that you're in compliance basically with the rules as SBIR rules. So if you want to get the process going, oh yeah, here so we have um referrals, of course. So if you want, we have more, right? So there are if when I send out this slide deck and the recording of the presentation, I'll I'll include some customer case studies, right? So no, one thing that's important to say, if you want us to remain in the background, we do, right? So that means of course some startups, some companies, they don't want it to be known that they're hiring a consulting company to help them write a proposal. That's perfectly fine, right? I mean, we'll keep the existence of any relationship completely confidential. Okay, if you want us to. Yeah. Okay, and this is if you want to snap a picture of a slide right now, that's the one. That's the preferred one. It's my email address. Um, email is the preferred way of getting in touch with us. So please don't send me an email trying to set up a call right away. There is a time and place to set up a call. More sooner or later. But we're getting too many inquiries. I cannot set up a call with every first contactee, so to speak, right? So we need to exchange some information, make sure that we know what your company is roughly about. So we need to know who you are, and then otherwise the call is a waste of time. It's just a meet and greet. So again, we're big fans of email, and so again, email is very much preferred.